They told me I was lucky to have a roof over my head, even if that roof came with silence, comparison, and being constantly overlooked. I was the one who kept things together behind the scenes while my sister got the applause. For years I thought if I worked hard enough, they'd finally see me. But what I discovered changed everything. Let me take you back to the day it all began. I froze just outside my father's study, my fingers tightening around the chip frame of the old door. The voices inside sliced through me like glass. "We can't afford both," Dad said, his tone flat and businesslike, like he was negotiating a contract instead of discussing his daughters. "Natalie takes priority. She's marrying into the Langston family. Marissa should just stay with the cafe. It's practical." The cafe? The word stung more than I expected, like a slap to the years I'd spent grinding through school, pouring every ounce of effort into proving I mattered. I heard Mom's voice, soft and hesitant like always, trying to sound fair. "But we promised to support both girls. Natalie's got the spotlight now, but Marissa, she just needs to be more realistic. It's what's best for her," Dad cut in, ending the conversation with an air of finality. I stepped back, my body numb. For years I'd told myself I was being dramatic. That I only imagined the favoritism. That the expensive dance classes, the private tutors, the college fund for Natalie and not me were just circumstances. But now the truth was spoken aloud, and it wrapped around my chest like a vice. I snatched my coat from the hook and clutched my car keys so tightly my knuckles went white. "Marissa, where are you going?" Mom called as I reached the bottom of the stairs. Natalie was standing halfway down the banister in a silky green dress, her blonde hair curled perfectly, as always. "Mom made dinner," she said lightly, like everything was fine. "Stay. Family dinner." I almost laughed. Just another performance where I played the silent extra. "I'm not feeling well," I muttered, brushing past her. "I need some air." "Wait." Natalie followed me, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "You're being weird." "What's going on?" "Everything's perfect," I said with a bitter smile. "Just like you. Just like this family." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," I said sharply and yanked open the front door. "Marissa, come back here." Dad's voice rang out, deep and commanding. I turned to face him. Mom and Natalie hovered behind him, eyes wide with panic. "So you can tell me to my face that I'm not worth it?" I said, voice steady. "That the cafe is all I get while Natalie gets the world?" His expression darkened. "You were eavesdropping." "Yes," I replied. "And I'm glad I heard it." "Marissa, please," Mom whispered. "Can't we talk? Like a family." "A family?" I laughed hollowly. "You mean the one where I'm always the backup plan?" And with that I stepped into the cold, slamming the door behind me. Natalie's voice cracked. "Marissa, it's not what you think. Isn't it?" I turned slowly, eyes burning. "What do you call it when they sent you to private school and summer programs in Italy, while I had to take out loans at 16 to finish high school? When you had violin lessons and I worked double shifts at Baxter's Deli just to afford textbooks?" The hallway fell silent. The only sound was the soft rattle of wind nudging the window panes. Dad cleared his throat. "If you had just applied yourself like Natalie did, Don't," I cut in, my voice sharp. "I did apply myself. I worked harder than anyone. I got straight A's, I never asked for help, and still, I wasn't enough for either of you." Mom stood with her arms folded tightly, her lips trembling, tears slipping down her cheeks. Natalie couldn't meet my eyes. Dad didn't flinch, just stared with that same hard look I'd seen too many times, like I was a problem to solve, not a daughter. "You need to take some time and cool off," he said finally, his tone flat. "Come back when you're ready to be reasonable." I laughed bitterly and reached for the door. "There's no reason left in this house." "Marissa," Mom whispered, stepping forward. "Don't leave like this." But I was already walking away. "You made your choice," I said without turning back. "Now I'm making mine." The door slammed behind me, reverberating like a final word no one could take back. Rain had started to fall as I pulled out of the driveway. It tapped softly against the windshield while I drove through the quiet streets of Savannah Heights, my vision blurry from tears. But under the ache, beneath the bruises their words left, there was something else. Something unfamiliar. Freedom. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself parked in front of Aunt Margaret's house. The pale green shutters, the sagging porch swing, and the porch lights glowing through the drizzle, it felt like the first safe place I'd seen in years. I sat in the car, breathing hard. Then I gathered every last shred of courage and walked up the porch steps. The door opened before I could knock. "Marissa?" Aunt Margaret's voice was laced with concern. "Sweetheart, what happened?" That question, so simple and kind, broke something in me. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing like I was 12 again. She didn't press for answers. She just held me, led me to the couch, made peppermint tea, and wrapped me in that old fleece blanket with the faded sunflowers I used to love. I told her everything. All of it. The conversation. The years of being sidelined. Of working so hard only to be told it would never be enough. When I finished, she rose quietly and walked to a drawer in the old china hutch. From it, she took a thick envelope and placed it in my hands. "I was saving this for your graduation," she said softly. "But you need it now." Inside was a worn savings book and notarized documents. I blinked at the balance. $119,000. "I started it the day you were born," Aunt Margaret said, eyes gentle. "Because I knew one day they'd make you feel like you had nothing. But you have this. And you have me." I couldn't speak, only wept, finally, with relief. "But why?" I asked, my voice catching on the edge of the question like it had waited years to be spoken. Aunt Margaret looked at me with the kind of steady warmth that felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. "Because I saw what everyone else refused to see," she said quietly but firmly. "I saw you hunched over your textbooks by the kitchen window while Natalie was out rehearsing for recitals. I saw you bagging groceries on weekends while your parents hosted wine tasting parties. You worked so hard just to be seen, Marissa. And you deserve so much more than crumbs." I didn't even realize I was crying until her hand reached for mine. But I always thought maybe it was me, I whispered. That if I'd just been more talented, more graceful, more something, they would have looked at me the way they looked at her. Aunt Margaret shook her head slowly. "Honey, some people only see what fits the story they want to tell. But you're not the background in someone else's narrative. It's time you wrote your own." I threw my arms around her, clutching her like a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. She held me the way no one else had in years, like I mattered. "I believe in you," she murmured into my hair. "And now you finally have the freedom to believe in yourself too." Later that night, curled up in the floral guest room I hadn't slept in since middle school, I opened my laptop. For the first time, the idea of leaving wasn't just a fantasy, it was possible. The bankbook Aunt Margaret had given me sat beside me like a key to a new life. No more begging. No more being told, "Not now," or "We can't afford that." This was my choice. My path. By sunrise, I had applied to 5 business programs. My top pick, Savannah Coast School of Management, a fast-growing university with a strong focus on entrepreneurship. I hit submit on the final application, heart pounding, eyes stinging from exhaustion and hope. 3 months later, I stood on the steps of the administration building, holding a freshly printed student ID with the name Marissa Langley gleaming in bold black letters. The morning air smelled of coffee, paper, and possibility. I was here. On my own. No Natalie. No handouts. No more waiting to be invited into a life I deserved. The first few weeks flew by in a blur: lectures, team projects, late nights, and endless cups of vending machine coffee. Every time I thought I couldn't keep up, I remembered the cold dinners where no one asked how my day was. I remembered the jobs, the rejection, the silence. And I kept going. Business administration became more than just a major, it became a mission. I dove into entrepreneurship classes, started sketching business models during breaks, joined a student startup incubator. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. Then one night, sitting in the library working on a marketing strategy assignment, my phone started buzzing like a swarm of bees. Text after text from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Marissa, check the news. It's about Natalie. Your sister's boyfriend just got arrested. Big story." Heart hammering, I opened the news app. And there he was, Ethan Carlisle, Natalie's perfect fiancé, being let out of Carlisle and More Finance in cuffs. The headline practically shouted, "Carlisle arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, dozens affected." I stared at the screen stunned. The man my parents had praised for years as the example had just shattered every illusion they built around him. And somewhere buried beneath the shock was a quiet surge of justice. Dozens of families defrauded. Investigations ongoing. I stared at the headline, my breath shallow. Ethan Carlisle, Natalie's perfect fiancé, the man my parents practically wanted me to study, was a con artist in a $1,000 suit. The same man who once gave me a patronizing speech about ambition now stood center frame in a mugshot. Fraud. Embezzlement. Manipulation. And Natalie? The article mentioned several mid-level employees at Carlisle and more were being investigated for complicity. Her name wasn't listed, but it didn't have to be. The implication was loud and clear. I leaned back in my chair, the library's overhead light buzzing faintly above me. All those dinners where my father bragged about Ethan's bright future while looking at me with quiet disappointment, gone in a puff of scandal. My phone buzzed again. Mom, Marissa, come home now. We need to talk. Family emergency. Of course. I was only ever called when something needed fixing, not when there was something to celebrate. I closed my laptop slowly and packed up my notes. But this time I didn't rush. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one desperate to be included, to be valued. I was Marissa Langley, a student who had carved her way forward without their handouts. And I wasn't going to be baited into saving them. The sun had set by the time I pulled into Aunt Margaret's driveway. The air smelled like rain and jasmine, and the street was quiet, like a world removed from the one unraveling around Natalie and my parents. I stepped inside, comforted by the soft glow of the living room lamp and the warm clink of a teacup on porcelain from the kitchen. Then my phone buzzed again. Third call from Mom in the last hour. I stared at the screen. Ignored it. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Aunt Margaret answered, and there she was, my mother, shaken and unkempt, her sweater slumped off one shoulder, eyes swollen. Marissa, she gasped, reaching for my hand. Please. We need your help. I didn't move. Help with what? It's Natalie, she said, her voice cracking. They're saying she might have known. That she saw things and didn't report them. She's under review. They're calling it willful neglect. My stomach twisted. I had braced for this. Seeing it confirmed still stung. The lawyer says we need to pay restitution fast. If we can cover some of the missing funds, they'll reduce the penalties. But we can't do it alone. The house, the summer place, they're all going on the market. I sank into the armchair, cold despite the heat. You're selling everything? Even the old lake house? Mom nodded, sobbing. We're doing everything we can, but it's not enough. Marissa, sweetheart, can you help us? I stared at her. I wasn't a child anymore. I saw the truth clearly now. And this time I wasn't going to hand over my future to save theirs. And what exactly do you expect me to do? I asked, my voice flat. Mom gripped my hand like someone clinging to the edge of a cliff. You still have the money Margaret set aside for you, don't you? She whispered. Maybe you could, just temporarily help cover some of the restitution? I let out a humorless laugh. Of course. Now you remember the fund Aunt Margaret quietly built for me. The one no one ever asked about until it became convenient. She blinked, startled. It's not like that, Marissa. This is for your sister. That money is for my future, I said calmly, staring her straight in the eye. It's not a safety net for decisions I had no part in. She staggered back, stunned, like my words had physically struck her. Please. Natalie's your sister. I looked away, jaw tight, fists clenched beneath the table. For years I had been the afterthought, the second option, the extra place setting at the table. And now that I finally had a chance to live a life of my choosing, they wanted to pull me right back into the fire. I'm sorry, I said softly. But I won't give up everything just because she made the wrong choice. She didn't respond. She just looked at me with wide, pleading eyes before walking out into the wind, leaving the door half open and the cold air trailing in behind her. The scandal only got worse in the days that followed. Natalie was suspended from her firm. Her polished public image was quickly shredded across headlines and news feeds. Pictures of her in tailored blazers and heels were replaced with harsh phrases, under investigation, complicit, knew and said nothing. Our childhood home in Westfield was listed within days. The summer cabin by Lake Harlow, the one with the sunflower field behind it, was mortgaged in a desperate scramble. My inbox filled with message after message. From my parents. From cousins I hadn't spoken to since high school. Come home. We need you. Help us fix this. But I didn't reply. I knew what would happen if I went back. I'd be the bandage over their wounds again. The backup plan. The good daughter who gave until there was nothing left. And I wasn't that girl anymore. That night, I sat on Aunt Margaret's balcony with an accounting textbook on my lap, trying to focus as the wind picked at the pages. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Marissa, I need you. It's Natalie. I froze. The girl who had once been my benchmark, my rival, my sister in the spotlight, was falling. And somehow I was the one she'd reached out to. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. The air felt thick with something I couldn't name, anger maybe. Or mercy. After a long pause, I typed 2 words. Where at? 30 minutes later, I pulled into the crack parking lot of an old diner on the edge of town. The yellow neon sign flickered against the wet pavement. Inside, in a corner booth, Natalie sat hunched in a worn coat, hair limp, face pale and bare. She looked up, her voice a rasp. You came. I crossed my arms, my expression unreadable. Talk. Natalie stared down at her chipped coffee mug like it could protect her from what she was about to say. Her fingers trembled. I know Ethan was wrong, she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't think it would get this bad. I didn't respond. Let her sit in the silence she was always shielded from. I started noticing things about a year ago, she continued, still not looking at me. Inconsistencies. Files that didn't line up. Transfers that didn't make sense. She swallowed hard. Ethan told me not to worry. That it was just creative accounting. Everyone does it, he said. I wanted to believe him. Of course you did, I said, my voice cool. Believing him meant you got to keep everything. The job. The title. The praise. Natalie flinched. I was scared, she whispered. Scared of what it would cost if I asked questions. Scared of losing everything I worked so hard for. Of disappointing them. Them. Our parents. The ones who raised her on applause and raised me on silence. So now what? I asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She slid it across the table with unsteady hands. A deal from the district attorney's office, she said. If I testify, cooperate fully, they'll drop the criminal charges. I'd still pay a fine. But I wouldn't go to prison. I scanned the paper quickly. It was real. One chance. A lifeline. And it came with a price. I haven't signed it yet, Natalie added, her voice cracking. Mom and Dad are furious. They want me to stay quiet. They think it'll blow over if I keep my head down. I let out a low, bitter laugh. Of course they do. Their reputation means more than your future. It always has. Natalie looked down at the table. She seemed smaller somehow. Like the persona had peeled off. There's no one else I can turn to, she said. You're the only person still speaking to me. I stared at her for a long moment. The sister they celebrated was now asking the one they ignored for guidance. I think you should sign it, I said finally, each word deliberate. Not to save face. Not for them. For you. She looked up, eyes brimming. Tell the truth, I continued. It's the only way you start over. If there's any part of you that still knows right from wrong, do this. Tears dropped onto the paper in her lap. I'm scared, she whispered. Good, I replied. It means you're still human. After a long silence, she nodded. Will you come with me? She asked. I looked at her, torn but resolute. Yes. But don't ask me to carry this for you. I stood and pulled my coat off the back of the chair. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. City Hall. Natalie nodded quickly, like I'd tossed her a life raft in a storm she never learned to swim through. Before I walked away, I paused at the edge of the booth and said one last thing, low, steady, and sharp as truth. Don't expect me to carry this, Natalie. This is your burden to own. The next morning, a breeze rolled off the river as I stood in front of Savannah City Hall, buttoned up in a black coat. The chill of early fall crept through the air, clean and clear. Natalie was already there, hugging a manila folder to her chest, rocking slightly on her heels. She looked up as I approached. Her face was drawn, the sleepless nights showing in the shadows beneath her eyes. I offered a small nod, no smile, no embrace. She understood. I wasn't here as a sister. I was here as a witness to what the truth demanded. A woman from the district attorney's office met us in the lobby. She led us down a long corridor into a small plain room with no windows. Just a table, 4 chairs, and a black recorder in the center that ticked with silent judgment. The assistant DA, a woman with iron gray hair and eyes like steel, leaned forward. Ms. Langley, are you fully prepared to disclose everything? This will be a formal statement, and you'll be held accountable for every word. Natalie hesitated for a breath, then looked at me. I didn't say a thing. Just held her gaze with the same expression I'd worn my entire childhood. This is your moment. Take it or don't. Yes, Natalie said, louder this time. I'm ready. What followed took almost 3 hours. She spoke of the spreadsheets that didn't balance, the meetings she wasn't supposed to overhear, the emails she failed to question, the months she sat in silence while Ethan played with other people's lives, and money. She admitted to knowing more than she let on, and to staying quiet because she didn't want to lose everything she'd been handed. Through it all I stayed silent. Still. But the words sliced deeper than I expected, because in every confession was a mirror of what I had lived, the price of being overlooked while she shined. When it was done, the DA signed the non-prosecution agreement. Natalie would testify against Ethan in exchange for avoiding prison. She'd pay a civil penalty. Her name would be public. Her record scarred. Outside, Natalie looked broken. Older. But maybe finally real. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." I shook my head. "No. You did this for yourself. And remember, you owe the truth. Not me." She nodded quietly. And in the hours that followed, the news exploded. Natalie Langley turned state witness against Carlisle in massive fraud case. The Golden Girl was now the whistleblower. And no one cheered. No one called her the pride of the Langley family anymore. Natalie's name, once synonymous with galas, networking events, and polished success, was now linked to fraud investigations and betrayal. Her former company sent her a termination letter less than 24 hours after her testimony. The charity invites stopped. The friends vanished. Her social profiles went dark. She didn't just lose her job. She lost the image she'd spent a decade curating. And with it, the unconditional praise that had always echoed from our parents. But instead of soul-searching or accountability, my family doubled down on denial. I heard from an old neighbor that Dad was telling everyone Natalie had been manipulated. That she'd been pressured by outside forces. Mom, according to Aunt Margaret, told her church group Natalie had been forced into a corner. Not one word about Ethan. Not one word about their own blindness. Meanwhile, the actual perpetrator, Ethan Carlisle, was already busy negotiating a reduced sentence, dragging out the legal process with expensive attorneys. I didn't bother tracking the updates. That part of the world didn't belong to me anymore. That evening, I sat curled up in Aunt Margaret's living room, going over the final paperwork for a new business scholarship I'd applied for through the university. The lamp beside me glowed softly, its light bouncing off the edges of the envelope I would mail in the morning. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I wasn't building a new life to prove anything to my parents. I was doing this for me. For the girl who once sat under flickering lights doing homework while everyone else celebrated Natalie's wins. 1 week after Natalie signed her agreement, my phone rang. Dad's number. The screen lit up like a warning signal. I hesitated, then picked up. "Marissa," he said quickly, his voice tense. "We need to talk. Can you come home?" I leaned back in my chair, expression hard. "Just tell me what you want." "I'm busy." He hesitated. That wasn't the response he was used to. "It's about Natalie," he said finally. Of course it was. "She's struggling to find work," he continued. "The firms won't even interview her. Your mother and I were thinking, maybe you could help." I stayed silent. "You have a good connection with Mr. Ashwood," he added. "The restaurant group you're working with? Maybe they have something in operations. Just a foot in the door." I nearly laughed. "Now I matter," I said. "Because you need something." "She's your sister," he shot back. "She just needs a chance." "What about when I needed one?" I asked sharply. "When I needed help with tuition, when I was working nights and studying by day. You told me to be practical." "That was then," he snapped. "The family needs you now." I let the silence stretch. "You always say I'm part of the family," I said. "But you only remember me when Natalie falls." He went quiet. I heard Mom's voice whispering in the background, strained and shaking. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I'm not risking my name, my work, or my integrity to fix what you chose to ignore." Then I ended the call. And this time I didn't feel guilty at all. "You'll regret this," Dad barked before I could hang up. "Family is family, Marissa. You can't replace that." "Family," I repeated slowly, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "If I truly mattered as family, you wouldn't have treated me like a spare part. You wouldn't have chosen Natalie over me. Over and over." I ended the call, my fingers wrapped so tightly around the phone it might have cracked. Outside my window, slivers of golden autumn sun stretched across the sidewalk, beautiful but distant, like everything they'd always promised but never delivered. That night, my phone lit up with messages from Mom. Long ones. Guilt-laced pleas, laced with half regret and full manipulation. "We never meant to hurt you. You're still our daughter. Please don't abandon your sister." I read every line with a strange calm. Then I deleted them all. I wasn't that girl anymore. The one who waited behind closed doors, hoping someone would remember she was there. I'd chosen a different path and I wasn't turning around. The next day, I got an email from Ashwood Hospitality Group. Subject line: Offer letter. Regional Assistant Manager. I read the terms 3 times just to be sure. Salary, triple what I'd made as an intern. Role leadership track. Start date immediate. For the first time in years I felt the weight lift. All the shame, all the smallness I'd carried, it didn't belong to me anymore. I glanced toward the mirror above Aunt Margaret's fireplace. A steady face stared back. No longer timid. No longer waiting for someone else to define her worth. 3 days later, just as I finished organizing a manager onboarding session, a thick envelope sat on my desk. Hand-delivered. The return address: Margaret Langley, estate attorney. Inside, wrapped in a stack of legal documents, was a handwritten letter in Aunt Margaret's delicate cursive. My dear Marissa, it began. If you're reading this, it means the time has come to tell you everything. I didn't just save money for you. I spent years collecting proof, bank records, tax filings, business registrations, all pointing to the truth. Your parents set up multiple shell corporations. They used your name and Natalie's to funnel funds without your knowledge. I couldn't stop them, but I could prepare for the day you'd need a way out. My hands trembled as I flipped through the files. Page after page of evidence. Account numbers. Fake signatures. All those years I believed I just wasn't good enough. Turns out I was never even in control. I called Natalie that night. She arrived looking pale, worn down, a shadow of her former self. I laid the folder in front of her without a word. Her eyes widened with every page she turned. Her lips parted in disbelief. They used me, she whispered. They used us. I nodded. They didn't just neglect us. They exploited us. Natalie's hands trembled. What do we do now? I looked at her, voice firm. Now we take it all back. When Natalie and I stepped into the boardroom of Langley Enterprises, our parents were already seated, their attorney flanking them like a guard dog. Dad's expression darkened the moment he saw us walk in together. Mom's eyes darted nervously between us, her jaw tightening as if bracing for impact. I calmly set the thick folder down on the polished mahogany table and slid it toward them. We need to talk. Dad opened the file, flipping through the pages with practiced indifference until he reached the spreadsheets. His face blanched. The numbers didn't lie. Mom leaned in, her perfectly manicured hands beginning to tremble as she read. Where did you get this?" she asked, voice unsteady. "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice cool. "What matters is that if we hand this over to federal investigators, your entire empire will collapse fast." A heavy silence fell over the room. The lawyer tried to stay composed, but the flicker of panic in his eyes gave him away. "You have 2 options," I continued, my tone sharper now. "Option 1, we report everything and you face legal and financial consequences. Option 2, you sign over full control of the company to us, immediately and unconditionally. No more backdoor influence. No more board seats." Dad's knuckles whitened. "This is blackmail." "No," Natalie said, her voice steady. "This is accountability." I slid a second folder across the table. Legal transfer documents. Fully prepared. Final. "Everything's in place," I said. "All that's missing are your signatures." Dad glared at me with a fury I'd known my whole life, but it didn't shake me. Mom broke into sobs beside him, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't a plea for approval. It was a reckoning. After several long moments, they signed. Dad's hand trembled, each stroke dragging the weight of his undoing. Mom signed next, her tears dotting the paper like stains from a storm. When it was over, I gathered the files. Natalie stood taller beside me, no longer the fragile figure of guilt, but a woman finally seeing clearly. We walked out, not with vengeance, but with resolve. 3 months later, Natalie and I stood side by side as co-CEOs of Langley and Company, the new name etched across the building's front in bold bronze letters. Gone were the cronies and cover-ups. We rebuilt from the ground up, new staff, new leadership, new ethics. While Natalie restructured legal operations, I brought my vision to life. The Haven, a restaurant group rooted in community, innovation, and integrity. Together, we reclaimed what had always been ours to build. Natalie took the lead on legal negotiations and partnership agreements, navigating each contract with the clarity of someone who had once ignored the fine print and learned never to again. We didn't just repair the damage our parents left behind. We transformed it. 6 months after reclaiming Langley and Company, we had grown from a regional firm into a multifaceted business group, 7 restaurant locations, 3 sustainability-focused investment portfolios, and a fintech startup that had just been valued at over $10.4 million. The day we signed the franchise deal for our 8th Haven location in Charleston, I found myself sitting in a quiet corner office, watching the city lights dance along the river. My reflection stared back faintly in the glass. I remembered the girl who used to mop floors at closing time. The one who memorized flashcards between customers. The one who worked double shifts while Natalie flew to networking retreats. That girl hadn't just made it, she had built something that couldn't be taken away. A gentle tap on the glass pulled me back. Natalie stood there, smiling, not her old public relations smile, but something real. Something grateful. "We've got investors from New York waiting," she said, holding a tablet in one hand. "They're excited about the next expansion round." I turned to her, calm and centered. "Let them wait 10 minutes. She blinked, then laughed deep and unfiltered, and sank into the chair across from me. I poured 2 glasses of champagne from the chilled bottle we'd kept for this moment. The crystal clinked softly as we raised our glasses. "To everything we lost," I said. "And everything we'll build," she finished. We toasted under the dim glow of the city's skyline, a quiet promise sealed between 2 women who were no longer playing by someone else's script. Later that evening, after the investor meeting, Natalie and I took a detour through our old neighborhood. I pulled over in front of what used to be Bellevue Bakery, the place where I'd once been sentenced to a life of smallness. The sign had changed. Clarara's Bakery. A tribute to Aunt Margaret. The only one who had really seen me from the start. I stepped out and stood silently in front of the window. The warm scent of cinnamon and bread drifted into the cool evening. Laughter spilled out from inside, alive with energy. What once represented confinement now radiated possibility. Natalie stood beside me, her coat pulled close. "Do you think Aunt Margaret would be proud?" I smiled, not out of triumph but peace. She always knew we could do it. Even when no one else did. We stood there together, the wind tugging gently at our hair, headlights sweeping past on the street. For the first time, we weren't chasing legacy or redemption. We were living it. Marissa Langley had stepped out from behind the curtain of her past and shaped a future rooted in purpose, not approval. Once dismissed, she had become the visionary of a growing empire, and more importantly, the author of her own name. What do you think about Marissa and Natalie's journey from betrayal to power? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more stories of family, resilience, and reinvention.